I remember a mentor of mine was at our home, and he was just walking in our home, and he saw a closet, and he told us a story about him and his wife. He said, "I've been telling my wife now she has a lot of shoes," and he says, "I've been asking her to organize her shoes in such a way that allows me to put my clothes in the closet." And so I'm laughing at him as he's sharing that, and I'm like, "Man, like, when did you tell her that?" And he's like, "I've been telling her for 20 years." And it's just,
Chances are.
yeah, it just highlights the point that there are things in your marriage that requires your patience.
Mm,
And I think slowing down, and trying to empathize with where your spouse is, particularly if this is just something she's walking through, that's going to take time,
yeah.
to be patient enough to journey with her through that process. Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Rod,
And this is Kai.
and welcome to
Married in the Middle.
We have been married for 18 years. We have 4 amazing kids and a dog named Appa.
This podcast is about helping marriages flourish through the challenges of the middle years.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Rod,
And I'm Kai.
and welcome to
Married in the Middle. Oh, I'm introducing the whole thing. Okay, my bad. So we are in season 2 of Married in the
Season 2.
Middle. So honored, so excited about that we were able to come back with season 2. And this entire season is going to be based on the topic of emotional intelligence. And we just felt that was one of those topics that kind of branches off in so many different directions, and can relate so well as you think about marriage, especially marriage in the middle years, where things like emotions can be so unpredictable and difficult to kind of manage. So the topic of today's session is recognizing your spouse's emotions in the middle years.
Yeah.
So
And that's uniquely challenging to couples that are going through different challenges, different experience. Your plates are full, and only getting more full as the days go on. And so, how do we slow down to recognize where our spouse is? Have you ever had pillow talk or had some quiet time and asked this question: Where are we?
yeah,
Trying to locate where we are, how we're interpreting where we are, what we're feeling, what we're expressing. A lot of times those things go unexpressed.
yeah.
And so when they go unexpressed, how do we begin to read and interpret where our spouse is? Now, again, if you have not seen the previous episode, I want to encourage you to go back, listen to our episode on where you find the strength and power to do that. We are clear and unapologetically saying the strength for us to do this hard work is found in Christ and in Christ alone. And we pull no bones about that, right? And so we just want to encourage you now. What are some things that need to be done for us to engage with each other this way?
Yeah, so this episode is the last episode. It was kind of heavy based on a particular scripture, but this episode is more practical. We want to give you just some practical tips on things that you can be considering, you can be thinking as you're considering your spouse's emotions, and it's healthy, I think, for us because a lot of times we can read our spouse's emotions, but we misread them because we just kind of come to our own conclusions. You see a certain face or you see a mode that they're in, and you're just like, oh, okay, I see where we at right now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay away for
Yeah.
the next hour and a half, and we misread and we miss the opportunity to really engage and intimately with that person. And so I think understanding, like doing the work of understanding one another's emotions, and how that plays into how they feel and their day and the season of life that they're in, it brings a sense of oneness, I think, because when you're engaging in my emotions, when I can see that you're making an attempt to kind of assess where I am, it makes me feel like I'm not in it alone, like you
Yeah.
care and that I'm loved.
Right.
But I think that There are times, even for us, where we can sense each other's emotions and we're kind of bulldozing right over it. Like
Hmm.
we got to get through this day, so we're just
Yeah.
going to bulldoze right over that. And I think that we miss a lot in that. And so, yeah, we're talking about some practical ways that you can kind of get a sense of where your spouse is.
No, that's
I don't
good.
think any of these things are going to be like mind-blowing new things, but sometimes just the awareness and hearing it again
Yeah.
is good for the heart.
Yeah, I think when we talk about marriages and how well we get along, we think about the things that we have in common. And so we may think of our physical attractiveness to one another. That's physical. Or we may think of our intellectual attractiveness to each other. But rarely do we think about our emotional intelligence. And I want to just,
Hmm.
again, read this definition by Daniel Goleman. Emotional intelligence is the learned ability to perceive, understand, and express our feelings accurately, and to control our emotions so that they work for us and not against us.
Hmm.
And it starts with really trying to understand where we are and then understand where our spouse is. So today we'll talk about just understanding where our
Hmm.
a spouse is. So the first part we're going to talk about is we're going to call this observation, or what do you observe?
Hmm.
Our second part we'll talk about is how do we serve? So a part of this is watching, analyzing, paying attention
Hmm.
to where your spouse is. And then the second part will be like, will help you see what you can do to engage your spouse that way. So,
Hmm. That's good. So with observations, we just have a few of them here that we wanted to talk about, and a lot of it is just with your eyes, what you see, what you perceive. So things like facial expression. Do they have, tension in their eyebrows, or do they look stressed? How your spouse looks when they're not in a normal state. So what is their face? And based on their facial expression, you could get a sense of what needs to happen next. And
right.
again, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But also body language. Body language is huge because a person can be saying, I'm fine, nothing's wrong. Maybe they're not opening up yet or they're not ready to open up. Um, but what is their body language telling you? Maybe you ask, "Are you okay? Is everything good?" But they say that they're fine, but everything about their body language says otherwise. Maybe you go to touch them and they withdraw from you, or just physically far from you, or kind of tense. You notice that their body language is tense or dismissive, or maybe completely shut down. What is their body language telling you?
Let me just say this as a way for us to frame this. This is something that we are observing. We are not interpreting. These are indicators, not
Right,
determining aspects of where this person actually is. Because until we investigate, we don't know,
right,
right? And so their body language could be saying they're upset, but it may not be saying they're upset at you,
right.
right? It could be something that happened at some other point in their day. Or their facial expressions can be showing anger or
Hmm.
disgust, but that's not pointed towards you or to the kids. So you want to observe without trying to
Without the
play
judgment, yeah.
Inspector Gadget and
Hmm.
come to a full conclusion on where they are, and then approach them saying, "I know you're this because you did that." Like
Yeah.
that's unhelpful.
Yeah,
And
so many
so,
landmines, I think, so
yeah.
many blow ups happen for that reason. You making assumption that this person is feeling this or internalizing it. It always comes back to you. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's really not even about you.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah. And then next we have tone. And so tone is how I say what I say.
Hmm.
And if you're paying attention, you can tell where their tone falls flat. You can tell where their tone gets elevated and argumentative,
Mm.
and you hit something in the conversation if they become really defensive. And so this plays a part as well with analyzing the words. What is your spouse word choice that they're using to describe what they're trying to describe in their emotions? And so the overall perspective is you're doing the work of observation and reading your spouse, not just what they say, but how are they saying what they say. And so that takes a lot of patience in a marriage where you may have had a long day, where you're going through your own stuff that you're working through, and then to have to pay attention to what your spouse is saying
Mm-hmm.
is hard work, but it yields an incredible benefit because what happens is that spouse is experiencing being heard by you,
Mm-hmm.
being seen by you, taking into account how much you must respect them and care about them, to listen to their body language. So if something is happening, my face is down. I don't know why my face is down, and she walks by and say, "Rod, you look angry, or you look depressed or anxious. Everything okay?" And even if there's this tendency to front like everything's okay,
Mm-hmm.
here's what my heart is saying: "Oh, she sees me.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm putting off this perspective into the room with my family, with my kids, with my wife, and she sees it." And I think
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah, it is. And this sounds like a lot. I mean, if you think about the course of a day, if you could even pick up on one or two of these things and you don't
Right.
typically pick up on those things, I think it makes a huge difference in how you approach your spouse. Maybe you have a whole list of things that need to get done,
Hmm.
women, a whole list of chores that need to get done, or errands that need to be run. But maybe if you can sense that this is off, then maybe you would consider bringing it up a little bit later or checking in with him before you unload. So even picking up on a couple of these things can make
Right.
a big difference.
No, that's good. That's good. And now we're going to jump over to how do I serve your spouse. So you see something, body language, tones off, word choices um, is off. What do I do? And this is where we move from looking and observing to diving deeper into understanding where your spouse is. And the first thing I want to encourage everyone to do is ask questions.
Hmm.
Uh,
Questions are
d-
huge.
don't assume you know. You don't know. Oh, I know.
Mm.
I know. I listen. I've been with him long enough. Every time his right eye squints a little bit, he lying. I'm telling you, his daddy was just like that. He like,
Oh
and
Lord,
so we
not his
start putting
daddy.
together these stories as if we know. When you don't know,
Yeah,
you don't know.
yeah, for sure.
And so first encouragement to ask questions. Can you tell us the time where you have found asking questions to be pivotal in your understanding of where I am, or maybe there's another story that you can get that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think it still is pivotal for me,
That's
because
good.
my tendency always and still now is to assume when I see if you're tense or if you're seemingly anxious or angry, I automatically assume that it's towards me. And early on in our marriage, I would just try to fix things. I try to do things better or try to be more accommodating without even knowing what was really going on in your heart. And I think that over time that became exhausting for me.
Mm,
And that wanting to fix it kind of switched to anger. And so I could see you in a mode where you're seemingly upset or anxious or frustrated, and assume that it's towards me. But instead of trying to fix it, I'm then angry. Now I'm angry at you for being angry at me. And I don't even know for sure if you're angry at me. I have no idea what's going on in your mind and in your heart. And so I think now asking questions helps me, that tendency of mine, kind of pushing it to the back and being intentional about asking those questions helps to set things in perspective. And it could have been something at work. It could have been something during the drive and picking up the kids. It could have been anything. And I think you telling me what's going on helps to frame my mindset.
yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Another one when you talk about serving is being patient. This is the Achilles heel for Rodney Wilkinson. I hate waiting. Thank
We
God
know, right?
for
We know.
groceries that are delivered to your house. Thank God for two lines in a drive-through as opposed to one. Thank God
Oh my
for
God.
Chick-fil-A that starts the order way back early in the line. So the
They created all
tendency
of this for you.
is to be exactly who else would they create it for? But just this idea of patience, man. Being patient enough with where your spouse is, even if their emotional response is something you are wary of hearing.
Mm. Could you
Sometimes,
go a
no,
little
that's
bit into
good.
that?
No, I think there are times where you could be in a marriage and your spouse is here and some time lapse and they're here. And maybe they're gonna be here for a while. I remember a mentor of mine was at our home and he was just walking in our home and he saw a closet and he told us a story about him and his wife. He said, I've been telling my wife now she has a lot of shoes. And he says, I've been asking her to organize her shoes in such a way that allows me to put my clothes in the closet. And so I'm laughing at him as he's sharing that. And I'm like, man, like, when did you tell her that? And he's like, I've been telling her for 20 years. And it's just,
Chances are.
yeah, it just highlights the point that there are things in your marriage that requires your patience.
Mm.
And I think slowing down and trying to empathize with where your spouse is, particularly if this is just something she's walking through, that's going to take time
Yeah.
to be patient enough to journey with her through that process. And so
Yeah.
I think that's one of the ways that we are discovering where our spouse is,
Yeah.
and that we're willing to be patient with her and whatever
Yeah,
that is, or
because
him or whatever that is.
sometimes that's really, it could be um, a season of deep emotion. Like maybe it's grief, maybe she's experienced grief or
Mm,
burnout,
mm,
and that takes time.
yeah.
And it can be frustrating hearing that over and over every day. How was your day, or how are you feeling? Um, and it's kind of the same story, and you almost sometimes want to shake that person, like, all right, it's time to move on, or it's time to get over this particular thing. Maybe it's disappointment because something didn't go the way he or she planned, and you just kind of want to move on already.
Maybe it's infidelity.
Maybe it's infidelity. Yeah.
And that happened, and there's this assumption that we're good now.
Right. I
We're moving
repented,
on. Right.
and we should be able to move on.
We talked about this.
Right.
Right. And especially things, an injury like that doesn't heal overnight,
Yeah.
especially if you're not acting in a way that demonstrates you have learned from the mistake that you've made.
Right.
And again, that's why getting a third person in on it is so helpful,
That's
and
huge. Yeah.
encourage counseling and so on and so forth, because hopefully the counselor is helping you understand
Mm-hmm.
you need to be patient in this, and what you think may take 3 weeks may take 3 years.
Yeah.
Are you willing to be patient and walking with your spouse through that?
Yeah. I can remember a season where I was pursuing a certain career, and initially it seemed as if the doors were flying open for me, and I just knew it was God. I knew God was leading, and I was overcoming things that I had always heard would be so challenging. And so I was on this kind of path, and after some time, some doors started to close, and I don't think I was ready for those doors to
Mm,
close. And so I kept pursuing
yeah.
and pursuing and pursuing, and it wore me out completely. And I think that the day that I realized it was time for me to move on, I was devastated.
Yeah.
And that devastation probably lasted like a solid year.
Yeah.
And I can remember days being so sad and so low. I hate that. Now that I think back on it, like I hate that I had to experience that. But it was such a time of drawing near to the Lord and Him
Yeah.
comforting my heart, and me understanding that like Rodney can't be the one to fix
Hmm.
my problems. Um, and just walking with the Lord. But I can recall being really low some days, and you sometimes looking completely like I don't know what to
What to
do.
do?
And some days I could get a sense that maybe you wanted us to move forward, and but that was hard.
Yeah.
And And I think you handled that graciously. But some seasons are just like that.
Yeah.
So patience can be in the day to day, and it can be seasons of life.
And I think the next thing we'll talk about is non-judgmental.
Mm.
Um, we are one. We are one. But you have a story and I have a story. I have a calling, you have a calling. And God has us where he has us. And the speed of that calling may not be the same. What
Mm.
he may be doing in my life may take longer
Right.
to
That's so
develop
good.
into what
Yeah.
he's calling me to do. And
Hmm.
if you are constantly judging your spouse, um, not observing where they are, and then not serving them well with patience and being non-judgmental and asking questions, you are assuming you know. And the truth is, you probably don't.
Mm.
And so I think the non-judgmental piece is so important. Let me not compare my life to theirs and think if I can do it, why they can't do it.
Mm.
And understand that God has them on a unique journey that he's called me to be patient with and serve and encourage.
Hmm.
And I may have to speak hard truth, but how do I do that in a way that builds up and not tears down?
Right.
I think that's so vital. And I think people are going through different things, dealing with different losses, different griefs,
Hmm.
different challenges. And if we don't know how to come alongside and help, it's going to be a struggle. I remember a couple who were doing fine, and then they had a child, and the wife got postpartum very hard.
Mm.
And that season, probably a year, was the defining point in their marriage,
Mm.
into where there was always a struggle after that incident. And I think sometimes the crucible of a season and how we navigate it can speak to the whole legacy of our marriage. I
Yeah.
think I may have said this in a previous episode, but it's not what we do on the straightaways. It's what happens in the turns
Yeah. That's
that
so good.
affects the direction of our marriage. I think having emotional intelligence is so important. We get our degrees for our our mental intelligence, and we work out for our physical intelligence, but we don't do enough work for our emotional intelligence. And I think
Mm.
these things are incredibly helpful.
Yeah. The next one is active listening. I think active listening does include asking questions, so they kind of
Hmm.
can go hand in hand. But um, you know, reassuring your spouse that you are actually present, that you're
Hmm.
not just a physical body that's there, but that you are present with them in it, empathizing with what
Yeah.
they're going through. Um, Listening, hearing them, not cutting them off, because sometimes what they're going through might be you. You might be the problem, but being able to stop and listen and ask questions so that you can get a better understanding of where that person is, kind of being in their shoes to feel what they're feeling and experience what they're experiencing. I think that's a good kind of picture of what active listening is.
Yeah. And then finally support, and that's being present, and that's being helpful, and encouraging your spouse in that way. And then lastly, we just want to encourage you as some takeaways as you guys think through this. Man, have open, honest communication. Be honest with where you are.
Yeah.
This is going to take practice, so don't feel, oh, I mastered the tone observation, or I got asking questions down. I already like to ask a lot of questions, so that's just what I do.
Hmm.
Practice, practice, practice. Maybe on your next date night, or time away, or time you guys are engaging, or pillow talk, put some of these things we learned today into practice. And then we want to encourage you to pray, and pray for your marriage every day. Pray for your relationship. Ask for God's help.
Yeah.
Engage with God about increasing your emotional intelligence. And then
Hmm.
finally, if you need help, get help.
It's
Um,
okay.
get help. If you need to speak with someone, speak to someone. Any way we can serve you, we'll love to serve you. Our contact is below under this video or under this podcast that you're watching. So we just want to encourage you to to engage with each other wisely as you engage with the way you feel about your spouse. Okay.
Well, that's all we have for you guys for this episode. Stay tuned for our next episode. As usual, we ask you to like,
Like,
subscribe,
subscribe,
share
share.
on all of your platforms. You can send it to loved ones, people who you think could really benefit from it. And we appreciate all of it. Love you guys.
And
Praying for you
and
guys.
if you would like to support our podcast and help us keep producing content like this, you can see in the link a way that you can support our podcast. So we'd love for you to do that as well. All right.
Thank you
See you when I
guys.
see you.
Peace.
Peace.